Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. We are so excited to have Sonali Sadequee joining us here again, our relationship and communication expert. The name of the company is called Relate Consciously, and she's here to talk more about her business and, of course, all that she does and a little bit of her background. We'll get to know her first and talk about all the private coaching sessions she offers and even plant medicine, communication. She does it all. Let me have her introduce herself because she does wear many hats. Please say hello.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jill. Thank you so much for having me. So I love to support people feel happy and healthy in their relationships. And more specifically, it, ring in the skills of being relational. In a society and in a culture where we're very individualistic, it can feel very isolating, even when we're in relationship with people, because oftentimes we're missing the skills of how to actually be relational. And so what I do is I support my clients weave in the certain kinds of how do we show up, how do we communicate, how do we listen to each other, how do we stay vulnerable because it's with vulnerability where connection actually happens, where authentic being and showing up actually happens. But yet it is the hardest thing to do for so many of us, especially if we've grown up in a household where being vulnerable was discouraged or oftentimes even penalized, in a
Hmm.
where a lot of times people who are raised with a lot of like patriarchal force that can be not so helpful, like, oh, men aren't supposed to, have feelings or express emotions or cry. That can actually have a very damaging effect on us. And sometimes, so just examples like that, and so what I do is I support my clients navigate some of the old childhood ways of being, and transform and unlearn some of those old coping strategies that worked when we were kids, but don't really work for us when we're adults anymore. And so how do we evolve, and how do we evolve those tendencies to become more mature and relational? That's the key.
Well, thank you. Because I know you're working with individuals, organizations, couples, and really to help them build and nurture. And got to just back up a little bit to find out a little bit about your background and how you got into this. I know we've talked before, but this is our first Zoom, right? So it's good to get a little bit of your background and what brings you here to help others that have been in similar situations as yourself, as myself as well. I think a lot of us, nobody has the perfect life, right? And we grow up sometimes in maybe the households that aren't the best. Would you mind just sharing how this kind of impacted your work today?
Yeah. I've gotten into it a lot in our last interview, and since this is a shorter one, I'll just be very brief. I grew up in a volatile household, and so as a way to not contribute to a shaky household environment, I learned to stay quiet. I learned
Mm-hmm.
to not pe I learned to people please, my parents basically, and and as a way to kind of, be like the good little girl, and while that helped me survive and be liked by my parents when I was a child, and it just doesn't work for me anymore when I'm an adult. And so I had to unlearn a lot of that kind of behavior in my 20s.
Yep.
And yeah, and then and learn how to express myself authentically and express my needs, my desires in relationships, my boundaries is a
Mm-hmm.
and I oftentimes attract clients that are also in that similar journey. They're trying to figure out how to have their needs met in a way that is respectful, in a way that is reciprocal, as well as a relational, and not in a way that's demanding or um, divisive, And so, uh, yeah, and that's one. And then, people pleasing can show up in so many different ways. We oftentimes don't respect our own boundaries, and we kind of over give, or we over
Yep.
our energies, and that can, or we're like yes people. We say yes, yes, yes to
Yes,
everything.
yes, yes. I could, right? How do you
Yeah.
not, that's a hard thing, right? To say no, to set a boundary like that.
Yeah. And then it has a spiral downward, right? If we keep saying yes to everything, what it can do is leave us feeling drained or exhausted or even taken for granted, and we sometimes can find ourselves saying, oh gosh, I did so much for this person and they don't do much for me, and I feel so out of balance in this relationship. And then we get resentful and then it just turns into like this it really just murky, not very satisfying kind of a dynamic. But all of that can be nipped at the bud by from the get-go learning and practicing our being able to ask for what it is that we need and want and express our boundaries from the beginning and set up the relationship from the beginning with that quality of communication in place. And even if we didn't set it up from the beginning, say now we're finding ourselves in this kind of a relationship where we are feeling resentful or we are feeling taken advantage of or we are feeling out of balance, then there's a way to reinitiate a particular kind of conversation to turn the trajectory of that relationship slowly. In a way that we bring the other person on board to become a team member in the work that we got to do to balance that relationship. I'll tell you, it's hard work. It's sometimes it's very scary for a lot of us to do that work because when there's a pattern that's set in place, two people have gotten really comfortable and it's become like the norm in the relational culture. To turn that around is challenging, and so that's where I can come in. I support people to figure out ways to turn that ship around, if you will.
Got it. Well, thank you so much. And the website, relateconsciously.com. And there's a lot to what you offer. And did you want to dive into a little bit about the plant medicine for today? It's your show. I just want to make sure we're covering everything that's important to you.
Yes, yes. Okay, so I also tend to work with people that are partaking in plant medicine. That includes cannabis or psilocybin, or any other plant medicine of their choice that are specifically designed or their intention is to use the plant medicine as a way to improve their life and their relationships, specifically their relationship with themselves, their relationship with people in their life, in their family, their loved ones, their friends, or even with their colleagues. And we know that plant medicine has a way of supporting the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
It has a way of helping the brain to rewire and create neural pathways. And then also it has a way of dampening the part of the brain that can be very reactive,
Mm-hmm.
and unconscious. And so when we work with a coach like myself, what we can do is support you, the client, with a very specific container to do this work with so that your plant medicine experience is not just for the day, right? Or for that particular journey that you're on, if you're into macro dosing. But if you're a microdoser, then what I can do is support you with, of course, the protocol and educate you on the protocol, educate you on what kind of tools and meditations and affirmations, as well as day-to-day kind of relationship building skills that you want to start to integrate so that these kind of reinforcements are what is then helping you to rewire your nervous system and your brain. And so then it becomes more part of who you are on a moment-to-moment, day-to-day basis. And it's not just that one day that you did your microdosing or your macrodosing, right? It's something that is something that is weaved into your day-to-day life. And I work with clients about 3 to 6 months. Kind of depends on how much support they're wanting and needing. And yeah, and so so generally speaking, that's kind of how it works, is to support plant medicine people to create sacred, soulful relationships that are aligned with their higher intentions for their relational goals.
Well, thank you. And by the way, you're based out of, is it Atlanta?
It is Atlanta. Yes.
But you're working with people all over, right? So this is work that you could do via Zoom anywhere around the world, right? There's no restrictions.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And, keeping in mind of the time zones, and I try to meet it.
Beautiful, of course. Well, what else would you like people to know, Sonali, about the work you're doing and how you could benefit them and their relationships and their overall being?
Yeah, so what I would like to offer and leave people with here are some resources on relationships and the nervous system. A lot of what the work that I do is trauma informed, and so if anybody's interested, I don't know if y'all can see this. This is a book called The Body Keeps Score. It's very much about understanding trauma and how it impacts our nervous system in our life. The other book that I really like is called All About Love by Bell Hooks. Okay, I'm gonna leave that. And then there's author Gary Chapman. He's the author of The Five Love Languages, and he has this multiple versions of this book for multiple types of audiences. So there's, of course, for couples, and then there's some for teenagers, and then for children and for parents, and then I believe that he has one for colleagues and coworkers as well. I'm not sure, but this I mean I highly recommend this book. It's knowing what our love languages are and the love languages of our loved ones, our families, our colleagues. Knowing their love languages is a very helpful thing to keep in mind when we're relating with people, and the ways in which we want to support people and appreciate them and make them feel appreciated and make them feel loved and make them feel honored. Oftentimes we can miss being able to appreciate and love one another because we think we're doing this thing to appreciate them, but it's not really their love language, so it doesn't really land impactfully. And so figuring out what their love language is and then meeting that, which then helps it to land and they actually feel that. And that it just reminds me of what the monk Thich Nhat Hanh says, is that we must be able to love in such a way that the other person actually feels loved, you know. And
Beautiful.
yeah. And so it's some books and tools to keep in mind. Of course, the grand book that I love, that is very much my work is rooted in. It's actually upstairs, so I don't have it in front of me right now. So it's called Keeping the Love You Find by Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt, who are the founders of Imago Relationship Theory. And so I also highly recommend that book as well.
Beautiful. All right. And we still have 5 more minutes left in the show, Sonali. What else did you want to make sure we cover?
So, well, I was wondering, do we get phone calls or questions from audience or no? Hmm.
Well, I feel like, the work that you're doing, I mean, the lines are open if someone does want to call in 631-307-4010, 631-307-4010. If someone does have any questions to ask, obviously more about the work you're doing and how you can help. And, just one thing in particular, I just find, when it comes to relationships in general, it's sometimes hard to set up your boundaries. Can I say, yeah, right? When it comes to this is for I think anyone, individuals or couples, but how does it work when people have different boundaries? How do you learn to communicate and express your needs? Obviously, we're all different. Everyone has different needs and different, it becomes a little bit of a challenge sometimes. So what is your, if you could just kind of advice on someone who, we're all open to have our own boundaries, but when there's a disagreement, how do you walk that fine line?
Absolutely. So the practice of consent is super important in any respectful relationship. I actually have a mini guide book in my website that the listeners can freely download by going to my website. It's right there on the homepage. I totally highly recommend everybody. It has several different phrases. I mean, dozens and dozens of different phrases for different types of boundaries. So my learning in my career has been that there are, of course, physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, sexual boundaries, spiritual boundary, there's intellectual boundary. Then there's boundary around how do we communicate our time, right? Our needs
Yeah.
around. And then also nowadays in the modern world is digital boundaries, online or texting kind of behaviors and expectations. And so the guidebook gives you very concrete, practical phrases
Mm-hmm.
to communicate or ask for respect around these boundaries, essentially. And so I would say, like, for example, one example is that, hey, um, you know, I I would like to I would like to discuss, how we could, practice our let's see, I want to talk about emotion. Okay, yeah. So let's say
Sure.
fit. Okay. So, hey friend, I would love to connect with you and continue to spend time with you. And I would love to discuss how we can share and be mindful about each other's physical boundaries. Would you be open to having that conversation with me? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or is this a good time now, or would you like to set up a different time? Right. And so that right there is kind of like initiator, right? It's an invitation to have a very intentional, conscious conversation about the physical boundary, right? And and that's a proactive statement. Now, sometimes, we can be out with friends or a colleague or whatever, and they automatically say they just place their hand on our body somewhere, like shoulder or back, and it may not be something we expected or that we feel comfortable about. And so then, what do we do in the moment, right? And then in the moment, we could say, and the guidebook has several options, but one of the things that we could say, oh, hey, I'm noticing that you're reaching out to touch me, and could we first have a conversation about that?
Got it. All right. Thank you. They reading all her testimonials, if you go to the website, everyone, relateconsciously.com, everybody talks about, just your method, your skills, and your dialogue in a sense, and how they're really passionate about the work that you're doing. They say you're gentle, patient, intuitive, loving, bold. Uh, Totally recommend you. This is Susan H. Recommending you as a coach. Gosh, there's so many, testimonials on here about people talking about how you've helped them and consistently reinforce the idea, when undesirable circumstances present themselves like they do every day, you can choose to accept the situation, maintain a degree of mindfulness and appreciation for the beauty of life. And, Sonali, I know you're helping so many people with communication issues, not only self issues, but love issues as couples, as groups, and even in the workplace. And I know I read another testimonial, I think last time, from an oncologist, right? And so it's clearly you love what you do and you're passionate about it. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today, so we need to just remind everyone how we can contact you.
Oh, yes. So you're welcome to contact me at my email is the best way. It's Sonali, Sonali, at relateconsciously.com. That's my email address. And you may also text at 1-800-706-6778.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you back and looking forward to the next time we get to connect, okay?
Thank you, Jill. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. Have a great day. And to all of our listeners, please stay tuned. More of the shows coming up after the break.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
when I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.